Welcome to Night Shadows. I'm Stewart Best, where the paranormal is normal, where that which you thought you knew, you didn't, and where the future can be known if you know exactly where to look.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for tuning in and listening. We've got Larry on his phone down there in the Southland. Hi, Larry. How are you doing?
Oh, just hanging around in my bunker.
Tell you what, we may all need bunkers here pretty soon, the way it's looking kind of like Daniel 8 maybe in the offering. On our last show, you had mentioned, and we got tangled up in other stuff, several books you have read. You want to give us a briefing on those before we get into other stuff?
Well, it's really, really very interesting. The authors are actually married, and one's James Rossoni and Miranda Watson, and they have written a trilogy, a 3-book series, and I got the first one. It's called Rigged, like Trump said the election was. And
yes.
This book, literally, as you open the book Rigged, it's like opening the book into 2020. And following Rigged is the second book called Peacekeepers. And the third book, guess what? It's called Invasion. And let me tell you, if I was going to have to be in a bunker and waiting on the missiles, I'd like to read this set of books. There's 3 of them. If you don't read anything else, read Rigged. This is where we're headed. And I'm not talking prophecy. I'm not talking prophetic. I'm talking basic reality, historical facts, as the basis and the projection of where we're headed. The authors seem to be very clear-eyed, and it's shocking. But it kind of tells you where the track is that we're following and how that we may never see another election. Who knows?
I've got a feeling for some reason we aren't. Probably we don't need another election, that they've got something planned. They're spending money like there is no tomorrow, like nobody's worried about, how are we going to pay off this huge debt. They don't seem to care one way or the other, which would indicate to me that they know they don't have to pay it back. And, the deep state has got these TR-3Bs. They've got all this anti-gravity stuff, and who knows what kind of microwave or laser or whatever types of weapons they have, and all of this, of course, is probably developed for the New World Order to keep everybody in check. Very, very interesting, but the second book is Peacekeepers, United Nations. I want to get into that a little bit because of what's going on down there in Virginia. And Virginia, it could well be that this is a trial balloon, and they aren't ready yet. They're just testing the waters to see what the reaction would be if they tried it. How ready are the American people? Or they're going for broke. It's probably one or the other. And from everything that's going on in the Middle East, probably they're going for broke. Why don't we start with this then? U.S. attacks Hezbollah in Iraq. Proxies fire rockets at U.S. base in Iraq. Pompeo and Esper fly to Mar-a-Lago, I guess, and brief the president about time to hit Iran directly. And at the same time all this is going on, we have Iran, Russia, and China doing exercises with their navies in the Gulf. You want to give us an update on any of what's going on over there, from what you can gather anyway?
Well, from what I can gather, the latest, Walid Paris, which is an intel expert, was on Fox Business just a little while ago, and he basically said that Iran and Russia and China, that exercise that they're doing is an absolute message in the face of Trump, warning him that Russia and China's military has Iran's back. And by the way, and just a little while ago, I hadn't had time to post it, but a little while ago I found out from Decophile that the Russians are even now, as we are striking some of the Iranian-backed militias and Hezbollah forces and Iranian forces in Syria and Iraq, the Russians have begun using technology to jam our satellites that we're operating off of over the Middle East and try to knock out our ability to attack anything Iranian, even their proxies. So there is really something big up. But Walid Perry says that Iran and China just sent Trump a message that they've got Iran's back and we better just go home.
Well, Chris, as we've tried to point out before to everyone, the United States has no right whatever under international law to be in Syria or be anywhere in that area. We can sit there and say that, it's in our national security and our best interests, but from Russia was invited into Syria, we were not. And anyway, this latest thing, go ahead, Larry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to mention on what you said, isn't it so interesting that the entire media of the world basically is claiming that this is Trump's fault when Trump didn't start any war in the Middle East, not even one. He inherited them from a deep state government, and something else I found out that I didn't know was a military officer came on the other day on Lou Dobbs, and for the first time ever, he released information that even the Pentagon has a deep state government deep inside it that is just like the deep state with our own intel agencies and our own U.S. government. And he said Trump don't know how to play that kind of hardball.
No, they just kill him if he gets in the way too far. They're playing hardball, and that's just the way it is. But here's from this Hal Turner site. He says, U.S. Embassy civilian staff is reportedly being evacuated from Baghdad, and U.S. forces are under rocket attack by Iran-backed proxies. The Iraqi government is to hold emergency meetings at its National Security Council over this latest barrage, and America strikes Hezbollah. What's Israel doing in all of this? Do you know?
Well, I do know that Israel is extremely quiet, which is uncharacteristic of Israel. I do know that, and I posted today from the Prime Minister's office a report that Netanyahu had contacted Pompeo, and they had talked by phone, and Netanyahu gave a kudos or saluted Trump's attack on the Iranian-backed proxy forces in Iraq and Syria. We do know that Israel is really expecting an attack from Iran through their proxies almost at any time. And as far as I know, from the intel I've seen, they have their forces ready. They're expecting it. And this thing could just literally open up at any moment. And at the same time, on the sideline, I just saw a post a while ago that Kim in North Korea has talked to his government and his military and announced they're going to resist the U.S., to prepare to defend his nation.
Which means he's probably going to go back to launching missiles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I do firmly believe they've got more stuff than we realize, probably given to them by China and Russia. And in the game of chess, North Korea would be a non-essential. So they could have Kimmy, the whiz kid, do his thing, knowing full well that the retaliation would take them out, but they still leaves China and it still leaves Russia. Anyway, it says the Pentagon announced that American aircraft launched raids on the headquarters of the Iraqi Hezbollah militia, which resulted in the death and injury of fighters, including the militia leader, Abu Khazali, I guess. According to the American military sources, American F-15 fighters targeted 5 bases Reporters in the area say strong explosions can be heard. The attack at the U.S. Army site in Baghdad. So I guess this is now they're claiming 40 Iranian-backed terrorists were killed. Has Iran said anything about this yet?
Iran hasn't made a comment other than they're preparing their forces for an attack against U.S. troops. And there is in the southern region, it's ironic today, Stewart, they've had multiple earthquakes within 10 or 20 miles of the Bashir nuclear reactor facility in southern Iran, and at the same time, there's a lot of military aircraft and missile movement in that region. It appears that they're going to move pretty strong against any U.S. forces in that region. What I was going to say was the fact also that Iraq is extremely upset because we're attacking the Iranians inside Iraq, and they're afraid that some Iraqis will be killed. Now, how ironic is that, Stewart? Iraq recently in Baghdad has had Soleimani leading forces to actually kill Iraqi people in Baghdad that are protesting against the Iranians in Baghdad. But they're worried that the U.S. might kill an Iraqi. So Stewart, it's kind of like a no-win solution. And my concern is, I was reading today how the Pentagon is wanting to mothball some more naval vessels, and I'm thinking we ain't even got enough now. And that book series I read earlier, it's the book 1, 2, and 3 of the Falling Empire series.
Yeah, we're definitely falling. I've been trying to warn people for a long time that America must and will go down, and that people need to prepare for this and pray that the Lord will take his people out before the whole thing deteriorates. However, we don't know that, so we have to prepare for it. Here's something that the Prime Minister inside Iraq and Syria, Prime Minister says, the American military presence has become a burden for the state and a source of aggression against our forces, and therefore it has become mandatory for all of us to expel them from Iraq. So we're not wanted over there at all. And insider sources say that Pompeo and Esper plan to tell President Trump Iran has crossed our red line and attacked U.S. forces after being warned not to. Both secretaries will allegedly tell the president it's time for the United States to militarily strike Iran directly. Well, this kind of gets into the Daniel 8 routine, where we evidently push Iran into a move that's probably not too wise. Here it is in the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, even unto me Daniel, after which appeared unto me the first. And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass, when I saw that I was in Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river Ulai, I guess is how you pronounce that, or Ulai. They lifted up mine eyes. Then I lifted up my eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns, and 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward, northward, southward, so that no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. He did according to his will, and he became great. And as I was considering, behold, a he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And he came to the ram that had two horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. And I saw him come close to the ram, and he was moved with choler against him. He smote the ram, brake his two horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him. He was cast down to the ground and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. There's a Jewish rabbi that we are the he-goat, and the ram is Iran. And they evidently, Iran decides what do they got to lose, so they go forth, and then we take them out, basically, or at least wound them greatly. So I'm beginning to wonder, is this part of Daniel 8? Is this the beginning of it, do you think?
Well, it's entirely possible, Stewart. We're, not only is Israel attacking Iranian proxies, but the U.S. now is attacking Iranian proxies. What's interesting is the fact that recently there's been lots of, well over thousands of Iranians killed because of the protests in the streets. So the Iranian government, if you will, and the Ayatollah and that regime, they can't afford to stand by much longer because they're being decimated by the sanctions that Trump put on them, and they're being military attacked. All their bases that are in their proxy states are being attacked, are under threat, and so they don't have a choice. If they really do want to take out Israel, they're going to have to move soon or begin to lose or find their assets diminished that they're going to use against Israel. The interesting thing is we do know that Russia goes down, so possibly Daniel 8 might also be connected to a greater move by Russia and China into Israel.
Yeah, and that would bring, of course, into probably Isaiah 17, and that would trigger Ezekiel 38, 39. Yeah, we got to be awful close to this thing. I mean, it's possible the Lord puts up his hand and says, nope, not yet. I mean, like he's done before, where we come awful close and then it quiets back down. But there's a lot going on. And what is troubling to me is we have this thing going on in Virginia. National Rifle Association, Virginia governor preparing for mass incarcerations of gun owners with increase in corrections budget. And independent media has been reporting now for more than a month a showdown is nearing in the state of Virginia between patriots who are set to oppose a raft of new gun control laws that may include confiscations, and Democrats who are behaving more like King George ahead of the American Revolution. Some 114 counties and local jurisdictions have now adopted so-called Second Amendment sanctuary policies that mimic those of sanctuary cities passed by Democrats around the country that shield illegal immigrants from deportation. And, of course, the governor's coming out and saying, you are going to obey these laws, and if you won't, I'm going to activate the National Guard. And, of course, if they wouldn't comply, would they not have to activate the U.S. military? And if the U.S. military wouldn't do it, they'd probably bring in the United Nations under their charter. I've urged, and this is interesting, Larry, because it's a lot on YouTube, and I was posting stuff on these guys that are in Virginia talking about what's going on down there, and I said, you guys need to read State Department document 7277, because behind all this is the United Nations and their agendas for global control and total disarmament. And they were immediately removed within minutes after I posted them. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm fully aware of the removal process. Tucker Carlson said today in a meeting, Tucker Carlson out of Fox, he said that the mainstream and social media threat is much greater to America than even immigration and trade. He said this is terrible because he said all the truth is being stopped before it can get on the airwaves and get to the people, and that's exactly what they're doing. And I wanted to add this, Stewart, and get your opinion, because I'm seeing a lot of intel that's coming out of Virginia and Colorado and California that it's a pre-planned move of the left to bring in the United Nations to even stand against Trump, if possible. So, you know, we know this plan, it's out there. Matter of fact, ironically, James Rossoni and Miranda Watson in Book 2, The Peacekeepers, they don't really have to make it up. I mean, it's not like they're making up fiction. They're writing a lot of faction.
Yes. And that's, you know, Peacekeepers is all UN. And I just wish people would familiarize themselves with the State Department document 7277. That came out of our State Department. Our State Department is committing treason, has been for a long, long time. They're going to get away with it. They don't have to worry about that somebody's not going to. This is what they have planned for a long, long time. And they want a revolution. They want the patriots to come out into the streets. My advice is don't do it. My advice is stay home. However, you have a right to defend your property and your loved ones. So if a sheriff comes out there and he's got a warrant that you know perfectly well is a fake warrant, you tell him it's a fake warrant, and he better just turn around and go home. And I think that could be defeated. Also, I looked up the impeachment of the governor and recall, and both are available under Virginia law. The governor, the attorney general, and these people, they're communists, and they are doing exactly what they're told to do. And this is all part of an overall strategy to take down the United States. For the life of me, I cannot understand why the people cannot see Pelosi, Schumer, all these people are deep state communists. And what we are watching is a communist insurrection directed by the United Nations. Why do they think they have all these military-style, hardened UN vehicles all over the United States? I've got pictures of them. They've been spotted everywhere. They're not only in warehouses, they've been seen on trains that are virtually miles long, pulling all these vehicles. This is a UN takeover. This has been well planned. And what we're watching is Daniel chapter 7 and the United Nations. This is what it says, verse 23. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, shall tread it down and break it in pieces. I'll stop right there with that one verse on 23, kind of interesting. The United Nations is not a nation. It's not a state. It is nothing more than an organization. That's all it is. It's an organization. And that organization has gone forth through treaties and has usurped the sovereignty of the United States and all. It's what it's doing all over the world. It's absorbing the sovereignties of the nations via treaty. And through that method, rises up to take the world. That's why you had the Pope and Obama on 9/23, shaking hands at 9:23 in the morning in Washington, D.C. Then what do? They go up to the UN for Agenda 23, 21, Agenda 30, Agenda 50. Folks, wake up. This is a UN takeover. You're going to be seeing UN troops. Even Henry Kissinger said the day is coming when you're going to be applauding UN troops in the streets of our nation. And they mean what they say. They're going to do it. Larry, I don't know what to say to people anymore.
I
what
know.
do you think?
I think that people need to blink their eyes a couple of times and shake their head and wake up, because not only is the United Nations a perversion, it's an absolutely genetic perversion. And, and a smaller UN, if you will, Stewart, is Washington, D.C., or District of Columbia. It's not even a state. It's not even a state. Can people figure that out? It's like the Federal Reserve is not federal. Nothing to do with the United States government. Nobody thinks it. But what we say, Stewart, I got an email over the weekend said, well, we watched for Christmas, nothing happened. But, Stewart, I'm still going to warn people anyway, okay?
Well, it's going to happen. And when I produced Iron Mountain Blueprint Fraternity, which, by the way, you can get on Angel Fall 923 if you don't believe it, it's all documented. It's all but happened already. We got UN troops. We got a lot of them will be Chinese troops. It's all part of this overall global strategy. And they're going to win. They're going to win, according to the Bible. They do take over. And then God, who isn't too happy about what they've done, will take every one of these poor souls, including the rich men of the earth, and they're going to end up in hell, which they mock and laugh and say there is no such thing. I got news for you, folks. I'm not religious, never was, and I saw a little bit of hell. Nobody wants to go there. I don't care if you're Henry Kissinger. I don't care if you're the Pope. You don't want to go there. And unfortunately, probably 95% of the human race is going to go there because they mock Jesus Christ. They have rejected Jesus Christ. Even the Christians, by and large, have not done what Jesus Christ commanded them to do. They won't do it. I don't have to do that. Jesus made one comment. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I say? That should be the answer that everybody ought to ponder. So anyway, it is what it is. We're heading in, and keep your eyes on the Middle East, and keep your eyes especially on what happens in Virginia, because we're going to find out whether this is a trial balloon and they just want to test the waters and see what kind of resistance they're going to have, or whether they've decided to go for broke. And if they've decided to go for broke, you're going to see some really bad stuff happen in the United States. And I've noticed Donald Trump hasn't said a word about what's going on in Virginia that I know of. If anybody out there has heard, let me know. Any final word there, Larry?
No, I think at the present time, there's just too much silence, and a lot of the news is being kept from the people. And you and I, we do the best we can to get intelligence to them, but the final word is keep your family safe and watch your homes.
Yeah, especially on travel. And if you leave your home, be watching what it is when you get back, if anything's out of place, et cetera, et cetera. I think they're going to start with the assassination attempts pretty soon, too. A lot of things are going on, and we haven't even touched earthquakes, which are really starting to accelerate everywhere. And we'll probably have to do one Wednesday and maybe a little longer one, and keep you posted on what's happened. Because a lot of this you're not going to get in the news. Thanks a lot, Larry, for coming on. Really appreciate it. And, folks, just keep your heads up and pray always that you be worthy to stand before the Son of Man. And that's a very interesting verse of Scripture that nobody pays much attention to. And they should, because it's a deadly verse. It's a deadly statement. Anyway, take care, everyone. Heads up. Monitor the news as best as you can. And we'll see you probably Wednesday night. Thank you. Good night.